The night skies over Russia glow red, not with fireworks of celebration, but with the flames of destruction. Massive explosions ripped through storage depots and reserve facilities. Moscow, which once prided itself on endless military stockpiles, is now witnessing the unimaginable, its last reserves going up in fire. For months, Russia boasted of its strength, claiming to have stockpiles that could fuel the war for years. But behind the walls of secrecy, the truth was very different. The reserves were crumbling, outdated, and dangerously exposed. And now, as Ukraine intensifies its precision strikes, those reserves are being wiped out, one by one. In the heart of Russia, footage emerges of burning fuel depots, destroyed warehouses, and shattered missile storage sites. Analysts warn, these are not just ordinary targets. These are Moscow's lifelines, critical stockpiles of fuel, ammunition, and heavy equipment that were supposed to keep the war machine running. Without them, the Kremlin faces the nightmare it feared most, collapse from within. The story begins deep inside Ukraine's intelligence command. Weeks of surveillance had revealed shocking details. Russian reserves, once thought to be hidden safely across vast territory, were in fact vulnerable, poorly guarded, exposed, and often clustered together. A single strike could ignite catastrophic chain reactions. And so, Ukraine launched its most daring operations yet. Long-range drones, Western-supplied missiles, and special forces working behind enemy lines coordinated with precision. In one night alone, multiple Russian fuel depots erupted into towering infernos, their flames seen from miles away. The air was filled with the roar of detonations, and the once boastful endless reserves turned into ash. Russian soldiers themselves began to whisper the truth. Supply lines had dried up, frontline units were left begging for ammunition, fuel, even basic food. Some commanders reportedly told their troops, "Use your weapons sparingly, the next supply may never come." This was not a military strategy, it was desperation. International observers watched in disbelief. For months, Moscow had promised to escalate, to unleash massive new offensives powered by its so-called untouched stockpiles. But instead of unleashing strength, Russia is losing its lifeline. What once gave Putin the confidence to threaten the world is now blazing uncontrollably across Russian skies. And the panic spreads. Reports emerge of frantic relocations, trains loaded with the last remaining supplies rushing eastward, desperately trying to escape Ukrainian strikes. But no matter how fast they run, Ukrainian drones seem to find them. Videos show convoys of fuel trucks exploding in fireballs, storage silos collapsing in flames, and soldiers fleeing to chaos.
This is more than just a military setback. This is the unraveling of Russia's war machine. Without reserves, the front line collapses. Without ammunition, artillery falls silent. Without fuel, tanks become useless steel coffins. And without supplies, morale breaks apart. Soldiers cannot fight wars with promises, they need resources. And those resources are vanishing before their very eyes. For ordinary Russians, the reality is impossible to ignore. News spreads across towns and cities, wire explosions lighting up the skies in Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, even near Moscow itself. Families begin to panic. They were told the war was far away, that reserves were untouchable, that Russia was invincible. But when the flames burn in their backyard, even propaganda cannot hide the truth. This is not just the destruction of military stockpiles. This is the destruction of an illusion. The illusion that Russia could outlast the West, that it could endlessly supply its troops, that time was on its side. Now, as warehouses burn and fuel depots explode, time is running out. And Ukraine knows it. Each strike brings not just tactical victory but strategic collapse. With every explosion, Russia grows weaker, its army closer to exhaustion, and its leadership closer to panic. The world watches as the unimaginable unfolds. Russia, once boasting of limitless reserves, is running out. And it is running out badly. The question now remains, without reserves, without supplies, and without hope, how much longer can Moscow keep its war alive? The answer may already be blazing in the night sky. The shockwaves of Russia's collapsing military effort are not confined to the battlefield alone. Inside Moscow, the once powerful corridors of the Kremlin now echo with silence, uncertainty, and fear. Senior officials, once brimming with confidence, now shuffle nervously in shadowed rooms, whispering about the unthinkable, what happens when the reserves are truly gone. Reports confirm that Russia has already begun stripping its Cold War-era stockpiles, pulling out tanks and armored vehicles that have not seen daylight in over 4 decades. Many of these machines are rusted, outdated, and virtually unusable against Ukraine's cutting-edge Western-supplied weapons. What was meant to be a display of military depth has instead become a global embarrassment. Images of broken-down Soviet relics being towed back from the front lines flood social media, further exposing Moscow's weakness to the world. On the ground in Ukraine, the effects are immediate and devastating for Russia. Ukrainian strikes have not only destroyed critical fuel depots but also incinerated entire reserves of artillery shells and armored carriers. Columns of flames light up the night sky as Russian soldiers, demoralized and abandoned, scramble for cover. Witnesses describe scenes of chaos, units without ammunition, tanks immobilized without spare parts, and commanders left without clear orders. The situation has reached a boiling point. With Moscow's logistical network under relentless Ukrainian pressure, supply lines that once stretched confidently across occupied territories have now been severed. Ukrainian partisans and precision strikes have transformed Russia's rear into a graveyard of convoys. What little equipment reaches the front is either destroyed within hours or rendered useless by lack of fuel and repair capacity. Meanwhile, cracks are appearing within Russia's own military ranks. Intercepted communications reveal that soldiers are furious at their leadership. "We were promised reinforcements," one Russian voice pleads over a scrambled transmission, "but instead, they sent us with empty trucks. We're fighting with nothing but desperation." Such testimonies paint a chilling picture of a force on the edge of collapse. But perhaps the most symbolic blow came when Ukrainian forces unleashed a storm of precision drone strikes on one of Russia's largest ammunition hubs in occupied territory. The resulting explosion was so massive that it was visible from miles away, shaking nearby towns to their core. Analysts say that this single strike erased months of Russia's dwindling reserve buildup. The loss cannot be replaced quickly, if at all. As the flames consumed Moscow's last stockpiles, questions surged across the globe. Has Russia truly reached the end of its ability to sustain this war? The evidence points to yes. From Sevastopol's collapsing naval defenses to the smoldering remnants of reserve warehouses, the narrative is clear: Moscow's so-called endless reserves have finally run dry. And in the background, whispers of betrayal grow louder. Reports continue to surface of Russian insiders leaking critical locations to Ukraine. Whether motivated by conscience, survival, or secret opposition, these betrayals are accelerating the collapse of Moscow's war machine. Putin's empire, once feared for its military might, now teeters on the brink of humiliation, its reserves blazing away in the dark Ukrainian night. The images from the front lines painted a grim reality. Russian supplied trucks, many decades old, held together with makeshift repairs, were seen abandoned in muddy roads. Columns of fuel convoys, once stretching for kilometers, now burned like torches in the night skies of Ukraine. Drone footage released by Ukrainian forces showed charred remains of what Moscow had desperately tried to present as reinforcements. Western observers compared the scenes to the crumbling of an empire. In wars of the past, Russia always relied on sheer size, overwhelming its enemies with endless manpower and reserves. But this time, the myth of endless Russian power was collapsing under the weight of reality. Ukraine's commanders revealed that intercepted communications had confirmed the worst fears for the Kremlin. Units deep inside Russia were refusing to move forward, citing lack of fuel, food, and even uniforms. Some soldiers openly questioned, "Why are we fighting, when Moscow cannot even feed us?" The failure wasn't just material, it was deeply psychological. Russian troops on the battlefield, hearing constant explosions and watching their armored columns vanish into flames, began to lose all sense of trust in their leaders. Soldiers recorded videos on their phones, appealing directly to Russian citizens back home. "They sent us here with nothing. We are abandoned. Moscow is lying to you." Meanwhile, Ukraine's counteroffensive grew sharper. Using Western-supplied HIMARS, ATACMS, and advanced drones, they struck at what little remained of Russia's critical depots. Bridges across the occupied territories were shattered, fuel depots ignited, and even air bases deep inside Crimea suffered devastating blows. Each new strike widened the cracks inside the Kremlin. Intelligence leaks suggested bitter infighting among Putin's inner circle, with generals blaming each other for the humiliating defeats. One report even claimed that Moscow's military elite had warned Putin, "If reserves are gone, the front will collapse within weeks." And so, the world watched as Russia's once feared war machine burned before their eyes. The black smoke rising from the ruins of its last reserves became a symbol of a nation trapped in its own war. But the question lingered: how much longer could Putin hold on before the crumbling front lines turned into a full-scale collapse?